Okay, I want to tie this into Eric's awesome game and presentation and installation, which gave me, I've been interested in the history of Monopoly for a while, but this definitely gave me insight on it, and also how sort of environment affects game designers. For instance, Eric founded Game Lab, and a lot of the games that are there were in the Game Lab library. They had a cool office. We used to sometimes go there for board game playtesting. And so a lot of the games you saw were originally in the company office where a lot of the games in the back were made. And those boards are all amazing. I, on the other hand, am more of a fringe character who lives in a rent-controlled studio apartment. And so my game collection is basically what I can fit between those books about math and those books about math. That environment has kind of shaped me. My main interest has become designing games using traditional parts that people already have. I'm sort of become more interested in game platforms. My IndieCade project this year was Tic-Tac-Totem, which is basically a bag of dice and chips. That's just sort of a central point for people to make games with cheap, reusable materials. I've also designed a bunch of games using traditional decks of cards. And so, about a year ago, I just started getting interested in Monopoly, which I had not thought about in a long time, one way or the other, really. It's just sort of there. But as someone who's interested in game platforms, it suddenly occurred to me that if I like using household items that people already have, Monopoly, even if you ignore that it's a game, it's just a thing that is in most houses. And if there was something that people could do with it that they would enjoy, that would be good. And that got me sort of looking into it. And the first question that comes up whenever you talk about Monopoly, because people have very divided opinions on this, is does Monopoly suck? Right? Right. I mean, the general, okay.
Yes.
Who would say definitely yes?
Yes.
Okay. Who would say no? It is. Okay. So see, it's a split. It's the Civil Wars that started over West. A lot of people, you have to be kidding when you say that to a lot of people. It is the world's most popular game. The world's most famous game, as the book says, or at least most famous proprietary game, which is I won't get into. It's the first game a lot of us encounter, before, I love that game. Before you even get to pick your own bid. You are playing Monopoly. And there's an edition of Monopoly Forever. This is Orange, Scotland. It is an island of 4,000 people. They wanted their own Monopoly because if you don't have a Monopoly, you have to have a beer and a Monopoly, you're a sovereign nation in some way.
You want fun with the family, you get to talk with the family. Video games, you just sit there and do this all day.
And there you have it, right. That is you just sit here and do this all day with video games. It's a social game, of course, All right, yes. So that's opinion. But people, there is something compelling, of course. You have the zodiac of Monopoly, right? You have the tokens that each have your own personality. That, an Onion article, which is where I get all my information, of course, is about how this child must be the wielder. Then there's the other side, which I feel like the majority of people, being game people, are on, which is I've played every game and it is the worst, right? That people who like Monopoly tend to be people who have not tried other games, that it is a game that actually turns people off from other games. I think the best expression of this sort of worldview I've heard is from, there's a pretty...
You want another game? A friend asked me to play a game I want to play? I play it. I mean, come on. If we're going to ask them to spend so much of their time investing in our games in this hobby, we've got a duty to support their getting into it too by playing games they want to play. Sometimes having that familiar touchstone helps somebody bridge into more complicated games, like playing a round of Yahtzee before you played a court the king and such. This, of course, has two exceptions. There are two games I will not play. One is Monopoly, not in any shape or any form with anyone, not for love nor money. I will not play it. The second is Munchkin.
If you've ever played Munchkin, you can understand what a grave insult that is. This is, a popular podcast some of you have probably heard by a guy named Tom Vassell about board games, and as you can hear, he was saying that, it was at first a point about outreach, you should play the games that people already know, you get them into it, et cetera, except Monopoly. You cannot get past that. And basically the Wikipedia of board games is Board Game Geek, and they have a lot of ratings, and the popular game there would be something like Settlers of Catan. Everyone loves Settlers of Catan. Or Agricola is one of the most popular, which is a mind-bending game. Then you get, Monopoly is actively disliked, right? And what's interesting is that at first I thought, okay, well, it's snobby, it's sort of an insular, like people get into the high-level stuff and they look down their nose. But actually, when you look at the other ratings, Monopoly ends up one below roulette, or one above roulette, but one below Hungry Hippos, which I have to say, I can do a whole other talk about how that's just an injustice, because they're rating it based on the new box, it's flimsy, the hippos aren't even attached to plastic, it's fucking ridiculous. Anyway, that's a whole other lecture. But my point is that, other games actually, Yahtzee, which you mentioned, people seem to like okay on this website. Risk does fine. Clue does fine. Boggle does fine. Scrabble people like. Apples to Apples, a popular party game, beloved by children, drunk sorority girls. I mean, definitely if you're going to be snobby about something, this might be the game, but that does rather well. It ends up right between Beowulf the Legend and Rise and Decline of the Third Reich. Which is, the next party I'm holding is actually going to be really quite awesome. That's one, and there's, and then you get into, killing Monopoly has become a theme. There's actually been a few articles in the last year about Settlers of Catan from the point of view, this was in Wired last year, about it as the Monopoly killer. It's selling more and more in this country. It is German-style game is shorthand for a breed of tight, well-designed game that resembles Monopoly the way a Porsche 911 resembles a Chevy Cobalt. I'm not sure what that, I assume it's like a Ford TARDIS. And then here was an article just a few weeks ago from Blake Eskin, one of my favorite writers about board games, in the Washington Post, and saying, about Settlers, but comparing it to Monopoly. More than 275 million copies of Monopoly have been sold, remarkable for a game that's not particularly well designed. And, this is basically the point, is that it is, whether or not it sucks, it's not a well-designed game, ultimately, right? I mean, his list of things here, there's a lot of luck, strategic decisions are limited, it goes on and on. One thing that's probably a bad side of the game is when most of the strategy is about the loopholes in the rules that have caused sort of glitches, right? That if you look at the strategy, it's about you only have this number of buildings, and for no good reason, once you use them, no one else can use them, and they can't build a hotel because you have to build a house before you build a hotel, but if there's no houses, so you prevent people from building things. That's strategy. Know when to stay in jail, because even though it isn't good, it is, whatever. Always buying our own property, if pretty much anything. The first third of the game, you have one choice to make, it's binary, and 99% of the time it's yes. Yes, I will buy that. But the thing that makes it so excruciating, of course, is that the structure of it is just so architecturally bad, right? That I made this thing, no particular reason I choose 1974, just picked a random week of baseball games and added up from the box score who won based on, in that inning, what was the chances the team that's ahead now is going to win. And you can see that it's, pretty smooth curve there, as you would expect with a game where the innings are separate. What happens is that game doesn't really affect the first or whatever, but if you're ahead, you'll probably stay ahead, et cetera, et cetera. You can see, sort of 50%, 60, 70, 80, Monopoly, of course, and this is just my own depiction of it, but it is a game where you start like that, and then it goes very quickly apart, and then for no good reason it goes into extra innings, even though it's not a tie. You don't need to play out the 14th inning when the score's 23-2, and you keep taking runs from the other team somehow. But that is essentially the structure. Here's a quote from John Blow about Farmville that I read recently that sort of reminded me of that, which is, he was saying that it looks cute and projects positivity. There is something kids games-ish about Monopoly, but then it is just a torturous experience that you make a child have to do eventually. Just to make an example, I actually got the new iPad Monopoly. This came out 2 days ago. I felt obligated. Here is a video of my entire 45-minute game cut down to only the parts where I made choices. So it starts about 1:48. Things go on. We go around the board a bunch of times, and things are not going well for me for the first 6 minutes. And I make a trade. I take an orange, and then someone else offers me a trade, and I say, oh, I'll get another orange. That's something to do. This could pay off. Sure. And then it's already 15 minutes in, and that is the one interesting choice I've made. Now it's about another trade going on. And here, actually, this is set on hard. There's no reason anyone should trade you the third orange of Monopoly. The computer does, and that's pretty much it. As you'll see, the next 25 minutes of the game, despite my victory, are not satisfying because I just kind of go around and around waiting for other people to die. They can't even kill themselves. It's like being in jail where they take your belt and shoes and your shoelaces and just there's no... So then there's actually an option. Someone doesn't buy something 20 minutes into the game, but I don't care. I'm going to just... You get the idea. There's our 25 minutes, which I've cut down to about 30 seconds there, but I'm already getting bored. It is a game that literally can go forever. There was a paper at Cornell last year that figured out there's a forever calculator. Basically, if one player's ahead by more than 2,200, they will win. Anywhere between 6 and 22, anyone's ball game. Less than 600, the game will go on forever. If you both have a lot of money, it's fluid, it'll just keep sloshing back and forth. You'll write up more money from the bank because they let you do that, just like here. And yes, this is another, the Onion, the fact that Monopoly is so part of our culture is what's interesting to me because none of us played it yet, it's all completely right. Okay, so I started really getting into the question of, okay, does this game suck? Is there again a way to fix it? And I started trying to make up my own ideas, just because that's what we started to do, but then I actually started doing research. And what I realized that interested me was that it actually was a good game at one point. And then something happened. Yes, very dramatic, foreshadowing. And I will lead you. So I realized, The Onion is called The Onion, of course, because a news story is many layers. That's where they got it from. The idea of a news story is an onion. So I'll go through the layers of Monopoly. There's the casual observer level, where we attribute it to a man named Charles Darrow, right? People like to attribute games to a single person, says Warren Spector, creator of Thief and Deus Ex. Here's Darrow. He was a guy, and he was alive in the 30s, and here's the thing from the official Monopoly instructions. He was unemployed, and he wrote out Monopoly. He sprung from him like Athena from Zeus's skull, and he made it by hand, and it got rejected, and then he sold it, and then everyone played it in the way that their family has played it for millennia. Because everyone has some strange house rule that they think is the way that you actually play the game, and there's rules you ignore. Again, The Onion pretty much sums it up there. And I will notice that, don't ask to be the wheelbarrow. No son of mine will be the wheelbarrow. I think there's some sort of narrative going on between all the Monopoly articles. But that's just sort of the general layer of what you know. It's a casual game, and you sort of like it. It comes out at Christmas, and then you play it a little, and then you stop. There's money under free parking, and et cetera, et cetera. And then you get people who are, into Monopoly. Those are the real Monopoly players, and they know the real rules. Like, yes, there are auctions if no one buys a property, which people do, but just in case. There's the building shortage thing. You can't loan people money. You can't do all these little things that make it not a really competitive strategic game. Maybe you know some fun trivia, like the hats are originally charm bracelet tokens, so you can see the little hole, and a lot of the other tokens came from fortune-telling favor cake sets. They're little pewter tokens that you'd cook into a cake, and then you'd slice it up, and you would hopefully not choke on the token. That would be a really right turn for your fortune, I assume, unless it's a wishbone token, which would be appropriate for your fortune. But then you find out, you'll never marry, you're doomed to be an old maid. Because you got the thimble, or whatever. There's other fun little facts that people who are into Monopoly know. Short line was the short fast line. It was a real Atlantic City thing. Marvin Gardens is actually spelled with an E, et cetera, et cetera. But the one thing that people who start looking into the history of Monopoly and know on the official level is that, yes, it wasn't totally invented by Charles Darrow. It's based on an older game called the Landlord's Game. The Landlord's Game was invented in 1904 by a woman named Lizzie McGee. She was sort of a socialist who wanted to make points about taxes, and she was sort of a fascinating person. I hope someone writes a biography of her, because there's little snippets I found. There's a copy of the game. She had a gift for acting and being wiry to impersonate boys in so-called trouser roles. And after she got married, she sometimes came to their door dressed as a lad and carried on a masquerade that lasted several minutes before her husband caught on. Obviously a cool chick. And this is a really interesting game from a lot of points of view. From the point of view of news games and procedural rhetoric and games that are about making an argument. This was a very early example of one. Even from just a formal point of view, the idea of a track game where there wasn't a beginning and an end, but you were going around and around and you had some sort of energy or money or whatever that you're collecting and depleting was totally new. Not really any precedent I've been able to find for it. On the other hand, it was a little boring. It wasn't a really exciting game, it was interesting. It had the lots. You started out actually drawing some of them before the game started. One odd quirk that was neat was the railroads. If you land on them, you get to sort of jump to another railroad. But basically the problem was it wasn't really aggressive. You're just going around buying and renting. You go around 5 times, then you stop. Whoever has the most wins. Meh. So, but it did actually moderately well. She managed to license it out. She licensed a version in Britain called Brer Fox and Brer Rabbit, and it kind of became one of those traditional, trap games that's doing a satire of politics kind of things. Those are politicians I don't care about. And it was kind of a hideous board, but it had certain charms to it, and some of these cards are awesome. You have caught infringing the copyright of the game, so you have to pay the bank for that. You have blood money on Putumayo atrocities, which you get paid for, so that's not even pay that blood money. And you are certified to be mentally deficient and must go to the insane asylum. And yeah, there's a jail, but there's also an insane asylum. So, it's Britain. It's a little harsher. And you can, cowsheds, the Bank of England, the basics. She came out, she patented it again, put the railroads on the side, had a different version, etc. Then the game from there became basically a folk game. What was interesting is that she lived in this sort of semi-socialist bohemian village called Arden, Maryland. She had made this game, and as often happens with game designers, what she was interested in wasn't what other people found fun, and it kind of diverged. People think was actually one who came up with the idea of monopoly. So you own these properties and you get some sort of bonus. And then it didn't make her taxes points or whatever, and she just sort of tossed it off. But other people followed up with it. Like here's a board from 1905, and you can see that there's little letters on the side. They haven't figured out the idea of coloring things, but you have little G's and little N's and A's, and that means those things are grouped together. So even that early, there was that sort of evolution. This is from 1916, and again, there's a lot of little aspects that evolved. You have Mother Earth instead of Go in the corner. Go to jail is go to jail, but it's because you're trespassing on Lord Blue Blood or someone's estate. Free parking is Central Park. But all the things, all the spaces are pretty much in the same space. Things move around a little. Here's one from 1908, that's kind of beautiful. You've got Please Go to Jail, which I like. Government grant, no rents, no taxes, rest in peace and depart, a little more pointed maybe than just free parking. And here's 1925, it's got colors, it's got letters, they're sort of coming together, but again, it sort of mutates in a million different directions up and down the East Coast, and basically becomes a game that is played by smart-ass economics students in liberal arts colleges. It becomes almost sort of the Grand Theft Auto, or sort of this satire of, let's be the biggest bastards to each other we can, in a very specifically villainous way. That's who's playing it. It becomes played a lot by Scott Neary, who's an economics professor, also immortalized in the movie Reds, is basically an economic radical, and he uses the game basically to show, it's sort of like the screw tape letters almost. It's like, what better way to show you how bad being evil is, yet make you do it because it's fun, and then you do it enough and you realize or something. So that seems to be sort of the logic behind it, and that's how it got meaner and meaner and more fun. It became about bankrupting, it became about becoming a robber baron and crushing everybody else. And in fact, it then gets around to the Quakers who get a hold of it, and here's just a handmade board that would ordinarily be kind of little consequence. But you'll notice that the names on this one, unlike the previous ones, are all of those Atlantic City streets that we're familiar with. That's because this is the one that was played by the family, who was a friend of Charles Darrow, who discovers it, plays it, makes his own handmade board. This was made on a kitchen table, most likely. That's the very first one. And he's got a knack for graphic design. Like, it's primitive, but it looks a lot nicer than that. You can see, I'd rather play that. He's already got the little stencils, the question marks, a little googly, but he's fine. And then he starts making more handmade boards. He gets a stencilist. He makes 500 of them. It starts picking up. Has his handmade edition. Parker Brothers picks it up.